It's the middle of the 17th century. You'd think the biggest problem would be avoiding the plague or figuring out how to wear those ridiculous ruffled collars. But Mother Nature, she had other plans. Welcome, history pros, to the Little Ice Age, a time when Europe got a serious case of the chills, and the consequences were nothing but little. The period from roughly 1300 to 1850 is now known as the Little Ice Age, a time of regional cooling, especially in the northern hemisphere. But the 17th century was a particularly frosty chapter in this saga, a period some historians call the General Crisis. This wasn't just a case of needing an extra blanket. We're talking about alpine glaciers surging forward, swallowing up entire villages in the Swiss Alps. In the winter of 1683 to 1684, the River Thames in London froze so solid that a frost fair was held on its surface, complete with shops, pubs, and even an elephant parading across the ice. But what was behind this dramatic dip in temperature? Scientists point to a cocktail of causes. One major factor was a significant drop in solar activity, known as the Maunder minimum, which lasted from about 1645 to 1715. During this time, sunspots, which are linked to higher solar output, became incredibly rare. Another key ingredient was a series of major volcanic eruptions.
When volcanoes like the Philippines' Mount Parker erupted in 1640, they spewed massive amounts of ash and sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, creating a veil that blocked sunlight and cooled the planet. This volcanic winter effect led to shorter growing seasons and crop failures across Europe. The social and political fallout was immense. Food shortages led to riots and unrest, and the economic strain exacerbated ongoing conflicts like the 30 Years' War. Historians argue that the pressures of this climate crisis were a significant factor in the political upheavals of the 17th century. Sir Chuckleton. So, while Londoners were having a laugh on the frozen Thames, the rest of Europe was feeling the bite of a much harsher reality. The Little Ice Age wasn't just a weather report. It was a force that reshaped societies. Lesson: climate is never just a backdrop in the story of humanity. It is a powerful character, capable of driving conflict, innovation, and radical change. And that, history pros, is a lesson for all seasons.
All right, pros, gather around. The year is 1466. The place? It's Tver, Russia. Most merchants are thinking about fur trades in Constantinople. Standard stuff. But our man, Afanasy Nikitin, a merchant with apparently terrible luck but spectacular ambition, decides to pack his bags for a business trip. Except his destination's a bit further than the next town over. He's headed for India, a place most Europeans had only heard of in wildly exaggerated tales. It was the equivalent of saying you were popping out to the moon for some cheese. His notes are incredibly practical, detailing trade goods, the cost of living, local customs, and the political landscape. He describes the immense wealth of the nobility in the Baharni Sultanate, contrasting it with the poverty of the common people. He also details the political tensions between the Baharni Sultanate and the Vijayanagara Empire. His work provides a rare, ground-level view of 15th century Indian society, politics, and economy, free from the lens of later colonial ambitions. Sir Chuckleton says, so a Russian merchant, robbed and stranded, ends up writing one of the most important early European accounts of India out of sheer grit and perhaps a touch of stubbornness. Lesson: sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't planned in a royal court, but are stumbled upon by ordinary people who refuse to turn back when things go disastrously wrong. The unplanned detour can become the main road of history.
Let's talk about hunger. Not the I could really go for a pizza kind of hunger. I mean a hunger so profound, so all-consuming, it defies belief and biology itself. Welcome, history pros, to late 18th century France, where we meet a man known only as Tarare, a walking, talking, human black hole. whose story is one of the most bizarre and tragic in medical history. Tarare, born near Lyon around 1772, was cursed with an insatiable appetite from childhood. By his teens, he could supposedly eat a quarter of a bullock in a single day. His parents, unable to feed him, kicked him out. He fell in with a traveling troupe of charlatans, becoming a freak show act. In Paris, he would swallow corks, stones, and even whole baskets of apples, one after another, to the delight and horror of the crowd. Despite his voracious eating, he remained shockingly thin, weighing only 100 pounds as an adult. When the French Revolutionary War broke out, Tarare joined the army. Military rations were, predictably, not enough. He would sneak out to scavenge for offal and garbage, and was often hospitalized for exhaustion. It was here he came to the attention of two prominent military surgeons, Dr. Corville and Baron Percy. They decided to test the limits of his condition, once feeding him a meal prepared for 15 laborers, which he devoured. Seeing this, the French command had a brilliant, if insane, idea. What if Tarare could be a spy?
Their plan was to have him swallow a wooden box containing a secret message, pass through enemy lines, and retrieve the message from the other end. His first mission was a disaster. He was immediately captured by the Prussians, who, unsurprisingly, were not impressed by his story. After a mock execution and a severe beating, he was released, traumatized and disillusioned with military life. Back in the hospital, his condition worsened. He was suspected of drinking the blood of patients and even, horrifically, of eating a toddler who had gone missing from the hospital, a charge that was never proven but forced him to flee. 4 years later, in 1798, a desperately ill Tarare reappeared in Versailles. He died shortly after from advanced tuberculosis. The subsequent autopsy was as horrifying as his life. Baron Percy recorded that upon opening his mouth, they could see a cavernously wide gullet. His stomach was enormous and flabby, and his entire abdominal cavity was filled with a diseased, foul-smelling mess. Sir Chuckleton. So, the man who could eat anything was ultimately consumed from within, a walking medical mystery that science, at the time, had no way of explaining. Lesson: the story of Tarare is a grotesque curiosity, but it's also a profound human tragedy.
It shows a person whose identity was completely consumed by an inexplicable affliction, reminding us that sometimes the greatest battle is not against an external foe, but against the very nature of one's own body. Ever been in a meeting so bad you wanted to throw someone out a window? Well, history has you covered. But in 1618, in the city of Prague, this wasn't just an idle fantasy, it was policy. Welcome, history pros, to the Defenestration of Prague, a story about bad politics, terrible aim, and how tossing 3 men out of a 3-story window sparked one of the deadliest wars in European history. The stage for this high-flying drama was the Kingdom of Bohemia. Tensions were simmering between the majority Protestant nobility and their Catholic Habsburg king. In 1609, the Protestants had secured religious freedoms in a royal decree called the Letter of Majesty. But the new guy set to take the throne, Ferdinand II, was a fervent Catholic with a reputation for crushing Protestantism wherever he found it. The Protestants were, to put it mildly, nervous. On May 23, 1618, a group of furious Protestant noblemen, led by Count Thurn, marched to Prague Castle to confront the king's representatives. The king wasn't there, but his 2 Catholic regents, Yaroslav Borhita Zamartinitz and Wilhelm Slavata Zahulem, were. After a heated argument and a sham trial, the Protestants decided to make a statement. They grabbed the 2 regents and their unfortunate secretary, Philip Fabricius, and, one by one, chucked him out of a window of the Bohemian Chancellery, a drop of about 70 feet. Miraculously, all 3 men survived. So how did they walk away from a 3-story fall? The Catholic version of the story claimed they were gently carried to the ground by angels. The Protestant version, which became far more famous, was that they landed in a giant, stinking pile of manure in the castle moat.
The historical reality is likely a combination of factors. They may have hit a sloping section of the castle wall, their heavy cloaks could have acted like small parachutes, and the ground below was likely soft and muddy, possibly containing some of that legendary dung. But this was no laughing matter. This act of rebellion, this defenestration, was the spark that ignited the Bohemian Revolt. That revolt, in turn, escalated into the 30 Years' War, a devastating conflict that lasted from 1618 to 1648 and resulted in an estimated 8 million deaths, redrawing the map of Europe forever. Sir Chuckleton. So, a very literal political throwdown became the first shot in a war that would engulf a continent for a generation. It's a darkly comical image with an astonishingly tragic outcome. Lesson? A theatrical gesture of defiance can be the spark that ignites a powder keg of ideology. It reminds us that the road to catastrophe is often paved with symbolic acts that spin wildly out of control.